So when we look at California's budget, we can see pretty clearly the structural problems and why we have such volatility. Where the money comes from, it causes a lot of that. So we have general revenue, uh, and 53% comes from individual income tax, 27% comes from sales tax, 11% comes from corporate taxes. And so when we're talking about good times, when people are making lots of money and they get bonuses and they're spending money and they're buying yachts and they're buying new cars and they're doing construction and they're, buying lots of stuff, our budget is flush and we have surpluses. And when that changes, when other people are losing their jobs, we stop spending money, we're anticipating a recession, sales taxes are the leading indicator. We can tell where the economy is going based on big expenditures if people are willing to take on, car payments and new houses and vacation homes and those sorts of things. So even when the individual income tax doesn't change dramatically, sales tax does, because people are feeling worried about that. So this causes a lot of problems when people are furloughed, when people are, cutting back hours, when businesses are having people work fewer hours. This really does affect that, and we go into massive deficits. When we talk about the budget, there's a couple of different numbers I want you to focus on. The one, when I ask how much is the California budget, it's $183.4 billion. What we do is we take the general fund, the money from individual income tax and sales tax and corporate taxes, general revenue here, plus we have special funds where we get money from, all different kinds of places that account for another $56 billion, and then we have bond fund for water projects and construction that we're currently spending on, and so that money is $183.4 billion. Now, in addition, we also spend the federal money that we get, but that's not really the state. The state doesn't get to decide where it goes. The state doesn't get to decide how to spend it. The money is from the federal government for specific programs, and most of it gets spent at the county level. So most of that money is money for welfare, money for unemployment, money for healthcare, and that's what we call pass-through money, which means that it passes through the state, but it goes to the county governments, and the counties implement that. That's also true of some state funds. We have Prop 63, which is a millionaire's tax. If you make over $1 million, you pay a 1% income tax. That goes to children's healthcare programs or new healthcare programs, mental health programs in the state. And so that goes to the county, and the county spends that. Special funds, this section, there's just page after page after page of these fees, and some of them are high and some of them are low. But our gasoline tax, those are special funds so that we tax gasoline to pay for transportation projects. We tax, tobacco to pay for the healthcare. That was an initiative. We said we were going to raise fees on tobacco and pay for healthcare. The mental health fee, Prop 63. Other fees, if you have a fishing or hunting license, you pay a fee, and that goes to the state. And if you buy a duck stamp for hunting, that's a fee, and horse racing is a fee, and your utility fee and solar panel fee, and all of these fees, page after page after page, that go in. But that money is restricted, not like the general revenue money that can be spent on anything. That money says, we're going to tax this to pay for this. We're going to tax this to pay for that. And those special funds really do add up. I mean, it's, $56 billion of all these little tiny fees, tax on alcohol, multiple taxes on cigarettes that go different places. Those are all special funds. So $183 billion is what we spend total. You don't really have to worry about the breakdown, but it clearly responds to the economy very quickly. So where does the money go? The money goes to just just 4 programs spends 90% of our budget. There's very little that's left over for anything else. So K through 12 education is the largest expenditure in the state. 43% of our budget is going to K through 12 education. 27% is health and human services. 12% is higher education, and 9% is prisons. So, this is the breakdown just visually of that. And so this breaks down health and human services. Most of our budget combines that. But there's not much left over after you have those 4 massive programs. So that's really where the budget goes. Here's the problem. When we have deficits, and we do, that's what gets cut. If you're a legislator and you're faced with, let's say, $20 billion that you have to cut out, you're going to have to cut education, health and human services, or corrections. And that's tough to do. Our corrections budget has more than doubled in the last 20 years. It was less than 5% in the 1990s, and now it's 9-10%. So what are you going to cut when you're faced with massive deficits? And that's a problem the legislature has to deal with. So you don't want to increase this too much, because you have to decrease it so drastically when bad times come. So as a politician, do you cut prisons? Well, there are public safety problems with that. If you release somebody who's then dangerous, if crime goes up as a result, that's a problem. Cutting healthcare is sometimes counterintuitive. You don't let people go to the doctor, you save money there, but then they end up going to the emergency room, which costs you more, and you lose all the savings you were intending to have. And so that's one reason that education gets cut so regularly in California, is because when you look at this budget, there's not a lot of other choices. K through 12 education is tough to cut, but we certainly did it in the last recession. But higher education is the easy hit, and often gets cut first when there's a deficit. And part of the reason is because college students are not, marching in the street with pitchforks and threatening to burn down the legislature if higher education gets cut. Most college students, take on more student loans and work more and begrudgingly pay higher tuition, even though they're not happy about it. Whereas if you cut K through 12 education, parents are screaming through the roof, and they're calling the legislature, and they're threatening the legislators, and they're calling the governor's office, and it's a huge backlash when there are cuts to K through 12 education. And so there is a correlation between how politically active you are and what is easy relatively for legislators to cut. Nobody relishes cutting anything, but the volatility of the California budget means that you're faced with those cuts at every recession. There are deficits. We're hoping that the rainy day fund will help. We've stashed that as full as we possibly can, anticipating the next recession. It will at least buy us a year, maybe 2. But it's tough. Often recessions last much longer than that. And so when you look at how few choices there are to cut, you start to realize why education gets tagged so often. So eventually, maybe the end of this year, maybe next year, maybe 2 years, California will again go through a recession cycle. It's just inevitable. That's how the economy works. And we'll see these kinds of cuts.